And happy Friday to you, and welcome to News On. I'm Miranda. We have a lot to get to today, so let's get right to it. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, the Department of Commerce says it will restrict U.S. interactions with Chinese-owned apps TikTok and WeChat. This Sunday, app stores will be barred from distributing either app. Both apps face financial restrictions as well. WeChat will not be able to process final transactions. Those same restrictions will not be placed on TikTok, however, until November 12th. The move comes in response to an August 6th executive order that came by the president, of course. According to U.S. Department of Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, this action is a move by the United States in favor of national security. He goes on to say that it aims to protect Americans from threats of the Chinese Communist Party. Also making headlines today, the Trump administration is expected to announce an $11.6 billion in a relief package for Puerto Rico. Devastation from Hurricane Maria in 2017, as you can see, just continues to plague that island territory. The aid package is intended to assist energy and education systems. The Trump administration had previously been criticized for its handling of that disaster response to that region. A crumbling electrical grid was cited as one of the causes for the toll the storm took on that island. And with just 46 days until the election, can you believe it? 46 days. Both President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden attempting to drum up support again all across the country as poll after poll shows that the race is tightening between the two candidates. Last night, the president held a Great American Comeback event in Wisconsin. Trump referred to the rally as more of a protest, if you will, criticizing the backlash that he's received on the campaign trail in regards to support gatherings during the COVID-19 pandemic. Among the topics he touched on was a new educational initiative. Take a listen.
But I announced that we're launching a new pro-American lesson plan for students called 1776 Commission. We're going to teach our children the truth about America, that we're the most exceptional nation ever to exist, and we're getting better every single day.
And coming up a little later here on News On, we'll talk to Jonathan Butcher, a senior policy analyst for the Center for Education Policy at the Heritage Foundation, about what the 1776 Commission means for children and families all across the United States. Last night, and back again on the campaign trail, CNN held a town hall with Joe Biden. That, of course, is the Democratic nominee for president, which continues to be widely criticized for being too soft on the former vice president. This, of course, in contrast to a recent town hall with the president that was conducted by ABC News that apparently did not go as easy on President Trump. This is what President Trump had to say about Biden's town hall and the drive-in nature of that event.
I just see he's up there tonight getting softball questions from Anderson Cooper. They don't ask me questions like that. And the audience isn't quite like this. Do you see what his audience? They've got cars. They have like cars in a pocket. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And CNN is going, oh, this is so beautiful. It's not beautiful. They have cars in a parking lot. What a deal, I'll tell you, what a deal. Biden's.
And from Wisconsin to Pennsylvania, both candidates now head to Minnesota this evening. Joe Biden will be in Duluth, while President Trump's Great American Comeback rally will take place in Bemidji, Minnesota. We'll give you a preview of what to expect during our live coverage tonight. That is going to be beginning of the rally will begin at 7 o'clock Eastern time, but you can stay tuned to Real America's Voice. We're going to be giving you coverage, as you can see right there, at 6:30. And coming up, Ben Berkwan will give us a live report. He is on the road, headed there, and he'll tell us what we can expect to hear from the president tonight. Meanwhile, COVID continues to take center stage today as the president and Dr. Fauci both suggesting a vaccine could be available relatively soon. We're talking weeks now, but that doesn't appear to be helping push the needle, if you will, on Capitol Hill, as Democrats and Republicans still have yet to reach a COVID-19 relief bill. Also in need of relief, the airline industry. which is now pleading with D.C. officials to help keep them in the skies. Joining us live now on the phone to discuss these stories and more is Just the News correspondent Daniel Payne. Daniel, thank you for joining us here on News On. Good to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So, Daniel, you wrote an article on justthenews.com about how some researchers believe many positive COVID cases may not be infectious. Can you tell us more about what you found?
Yeah, so there's this small but pretty growing line of scientific inquiry that is suggesting that one of the most common ways to test for COVID, which is called a PCR test, that many of the positive returns it comes back with are actually cases that are not infectious. This machine works by taking a sample of the virus, taking a sample taken from a patient and amplifying any genetic material in it to the point that it can be detected by scientists. So what some researchers are suggesting is that it's amplifying relatively tiny amounts of the COVID virus to the point that it makes a positive determination, but that actual case from that patient really doesn't amount to much. And what that would mean, based on some really preliminary numbers that haven't been nailed down yet, is that possibly a sizable majority of positive cases currently being detected in the U.S. Aren't actually infectious in any way, and thus the people who are being quarantined over them may not have to go through that process at all.
Interesting. Daniel Payne with Just the News. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we're going to continue to follow because, as I mentioned, COVID is definitely generating the headlines today. Still to come on this edition of News On, we asked you, speaking of COVID, whether or not, again, this vaccine is supposed to come out in a matter of weeks, whether or not you would actually take it and why. We got a ton of responses there from some of you. We're going to share those coming up. Also, again, we're going to have a live report coming up with our very own Ben Berkwam, who's going to join us next to tell us what we can expect to hear from the president as he does his rally tonight. Again, our coverage is going to begin at 6:30 Eastern time. He's going to be doing his rally in Minnesota. We'll get a live report coming up next. And welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Kahn. Well, we know the importance behind this presidential election, but almost equally as important is the 2020 census. Our very own Jessica Rivera joins us live in Denver, Colorado to explain why it matters to all of us. Jessica?
Thank you, Miranda. Every 10 years, the U.S. has a census, and as you may know, 2020 is a census year. But why is it so important? The census counts how many U.S. citizens are in each state for now, and I say that because California is in a legal battle with President Trump over counting illegals in their census. President Trump says no, and California says yes. But in the case, the National Urban League and the Census Bureau is asking to extend the census deadline in order to have more time to tally the national population, which in April, President Trump publicly supported passing a 4-month extension, but then he decided in July to make the deadline September 30th. But in California, federal court judge Lucy Coe, she just put that deadline on hold for now, at least through September 24th. But back to the census numbers, these numbers still, they do determine how many congressional representatives a state gets and whether a district remains the same or is redrawn to either add seats or lose them. The numbers also determine how federal funding and state funds are used when it comes to public schools, roads, highways, police, firefighters, and public transportation. The deadline for now for the 2020 census is coming up. It is September 30th. So the way you can make sure that you are counted is by going to 2020census.gov. You can also call 844-330-2020 or by completing and mailing back a paper questionnaire. And you can also head over to the U.S. Census Bureau's website for more information. Miranda?
Yeah, Jessica, we're hearing so much about voter fraud. Is there much fraud when it comes to the census?
Yeah, actually, so the most obvious is counting illegals to get more money for redistricting, making districts bigger. But there are also scams that actually stem from the census, and the ways people can protect themselves from those scams is knowing the Census Bureau will only contact you by phone, mail, or in person. They will not reach out to you via email. You can verify any of those methods via 2020census.gov. They have a Census Bureau online staffing directory there that you can double check, and the census will never ask for your social security number. Also, they will not threaten to fine you or take you to jail if you do not participate. And these are the only questions the census will ask. They will only ask how many people live in the residence. They will ask each person's gender, race, age, ethnicity. Also, they'll ask the relationship between each person that lives in that house. They'll ask for address and phone number and whether you rent or own. That is all they will ask, Miranda.
So, Jessica, what is the big issue for counting or not counting illegals when it comes to the census?
So there are obvious advantages and disadvantages to both. So what a lot are maybe, they'll come up with this solution that they'll actually do two census. Then the federal funding can use the numbers of legal citizens, and then sanctuary states and cities can use those numbers with illegals to fund on a local level, since those people are there in their community. But herein lies a major problem right now. There are cities and states that are looking to defund or do away with their police departments. But the census is in place for 10 years, and 10 years is a decade. That's a very long time. So should those cities and states have to commit to police support or not at the beginning of the census? And if they want to defund police or they want to cut all their police officers out, then should they need to fund their own solutions on a local level with their taxpayer money? So, Miranda, there are still a lot of questions about the census when it comes to who should be counted and the length of the funding. But as of right now, illegals are not to be counted, and the funding is in place for 10 years, a decade.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes about. Meanwhile, you and I were covering last night the president's rally in Wisconsin there. Now him and Joe Biden, they're both headed to Minnesota. We're going to, of course, have live coverage tonight beginning at 6:30 Eastern time right here on Real America's Voice. We actually have a crew that's on its way right now. We're hoping to get a live report with them coming up, but just wanted to get your overall reaction to the president's rally in Wisconsin last night. Did he get his message across, especially to undecided voters?
I think he did, and he spoke, Miranda, he spoke specifically to Wisconsin. We know that Wisconsin is known as the dairy land of the nation because of their milk products, their dairy products, and of course their cheese that comes from there. And so the president spoke directly to them when he told them, before he was in office, they had been being taken advantage of by Canada, who was very, very tough on tariffs. Canada wanted to sell their product to us, but they put high tariffs for our product to go over to them. So since President Trump has been in place, many Wisconsin people, because there are many farmers there, that is a huge industry that pushes their economy. So people, I think it really resonated with them because they could see firsthand how those policies have helped them, their families, or people that they probably know in the state. And so I think he did very well because firsthand, like I said, in Wisconsin, if you're an undecided voter, they actually are seeing firsthand some of the fruition of his policies in regards to dairy products. And so I think he did make a very good headway with undecided voters in Wisconsin. And I guess, like you said tonight, in Bemidji, Minnesota, we'll have to see. Of course, Minnesota is a bigger state, and they have a bigger population in their big metropolis. So we'll have to see what he specifically speaks to Minnesota about tonight. It'll be very different. But I do think that he is making headway with undecided voters right now with these rallies.
Yeah, I guess, you could say that the battle tonight is over the middle class, if you will, and specifically those undecided voters that you mentioned. Minnesota, again, a state that the president narrowly lost during the 2016 election by 2% of the vote. Curious, I know we were covering the president's rally last night, but, a lot of folks criticizing this town hall that was hosted by CNN with Joe Biden in Pennsylvania. Not sure if you got a chance to see any of the clips from that, but a lot of people saying that these were kind of more or less softball questions to Biden. What are you hearing?
Well, I think when you watch it, I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but I did get to see clips of it. And it is true. I mean, from the average person, for instance, if you are an undecided voter, it's hard to not notice that he is being kind of given these softball questions that they're kind of set up. He probably already has the answers situated. He's known these questions for quite a long time, and they've kind of been able to, I guess, if you will, be able to rehearse them. Whereas you can also see when they hold town halls with President Trump, how very attacking it can come across for many people, whether you're on the left or the right. I think people can see that for themselves. And so I don't know if these town halls are necessarily helping or hurting Biden, to be honest, but I do know that I wouldn't say I know, but I think after the polls come out from the town halls that President Trump is doing, it seems as if the polls are showing that he is actually making more headway when it comes to these town halls, because people know that he's not given the questions ahead of time. He's not given chance to rehearse, and he's kind of left, he's able to answer these questions a lot of times with a very quick response and on his feet, and he knows exactly what he's saying, and he comes very fact-based for a lot of his followers. And so for people who are undecided right now, I think these town halls are actually helping out President Trump a lot more than I would say that they're helping the Biden campaign right now.
Of course, we'll have to see, because the first presidential debate is coming up September 29th. That's going to be hosted by Chris Wallace with Fox News. So it'll be interesting to see your point, if whether or not this is actually going to hurt Joe Biden instead of help him by getting some of these so-called softball questions. Jessica Rivera joining us live in Denver. Thank you so much. Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you, Miranda. Same here.
Still ahead here on News On, we are going to be asking you what you think. Again, there's talks that a COVID vaccine could be coming out in just a matter of weeks. Would you take it, though? What some of you had to say. We got a lot of responses on this. Also, a new report about the homicide rate in Chicago. It's startling, to say the least. We're going to talk more about that. And the reward is growing now for that gunman accused of shooting 2 deputies in L.A. We'll tell you what amount it's gotten to now. And also the man that they're looking for, who they believe may be a witness to the shooting. We'll talk about that coming up next. You're watching News On. welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Kahn. The president making a big announcement yesterday. We want to turn our attention to education. He announced a patriotic education commission yesterday in D.C. right before his rally that he held last night. Joining us live now to discuss the purpose behind that commission is senior policy analyst for the Center for Education Policy at the Heritage Foundation, Jonathan Butcher. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us here on News On. Good to have you.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
So I want to play a portion of what the president said yesterday during his announcement, and then I want to get your reaction. Let's take a listen.
From Washington to Lincoln, from Jefferson to King, America has been home to some of the most incredible people who have ever lived. With the help of everyone here today, the legacy of 1776 will never be erased. Our heroes will never be forgotten. Our youth will be taught to love America with all of their heart and all of their soul. We will save this cherished inheritance for our children, for their children, and for every generation to come. This is a very important day. Thank you all once again for being here. Now I will sign the Constitution Day Proclamation. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you very much.
So, Jonathan, your reaction as you heard the president say right there that schools need to focus instead on the legacy of 1776. What did the president mean by this, and what purpose will this commission serve?
Well, I think it's a direct reference to some challenges to the way that history has been taught in the United States, especially in recent years. The project from the New York Times called the 1619 Project has tried to recast or reframe, as they say, American history around the idea of slavery. There is curricular materials that are recommended now from the Black Lives Matter movement that are also, I think, challenging our understanding of what really happened to get rid of slavery and abolish slavery in the United States. So I think it's important that the president, from his position, be able to recognize these challenges are out there, and then call on some, I think, award-winning and respected academics to help to answer these claims that are being made about what really should be in American history.
Yeah, but what specific role will this commission have on our schools? That's what I'm trying to gather from this, because you have a lot of parents there that are still struggling with this virtual schooling, if you will. How is this going to impact those parents that are watching this program right now?
Well, sure, and that's a great question. So I think the commission is meant to be one, as far as the outline says now, that will discuss these issues of fact that appear to be missing in what's coming from things like the New York Times, from books like Howard Zinn's books, and be able to discuss what are the factual inaccuracies that may be making their way into the classroom. It's important to remember, as Secretary DeVos said, that the federal government does not really have a role in local school curriculum. This is something that local educators, state school boards, even lawmakers, state lawmakers to a certain degree, have the proper channels and authority over. I think from Washington's perspective, this is an opportunity to remind parents who are concerned about some of this material that, again, contains a misrepresentation of American history that's finding their way into the classroom. So I think it's a good recognition from Washington that these things are out there, and that parents really should be, especially now as students are online, watching what their students are being taught.
Yeah, but you bring up an interesting point, though, right? Because Betsy DeVos, right? It's all about school choice and letting parents make up their minds for what they think is best for their children. Yet you have this commission that's saying, that almost comes across as this watchdog group, if you will, saying this is the way education should be. Is that kind of, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but isn't that kind of hypocritical, if you will?
Well, it's certainly a risk. I mean, anytime that there's an executive order from the White House, there's always the possibility that a federal agency could over-exercise the authority given to it. We have to remember the experience that we just came through with the Common Core, when the Obama administration incentivized states to adopt national standards, which of course were tied to national curricula and high-stakes tests for students. So any similar effort to take away money for something that's being taught in schools is, a parallel philosophy, right? And that's not where we need Washington to be right now. I think where we need Washington to be is a place where they are saying, look, the facts about American history are being challenged by certain material that's making its way into the classroom. The 1619 Project is being taught in 4,500 classrooms and counting in the U.S. Howard Zinn's book and its ideas have made its way into classrooms as well as into college classrooms. So for the president to say that this is an important moment to remember that the facts matter, the facts about history matter, and we have to be vigilant parents right now when our students are at home and having this material taught to them, and if they're being exposed to it, and parents need to be ready to speak up.
Yeah, I want to get your reaction too, because the president said yesterday, again during that announcement of the commission, he said teaching this horrible doctrine to our children is a form of child abuse. He was referring to what he called a twisted web of lies being taught in U.S. classrooms about racism in America. Do you believe that is a form of child abuse?
Well, I think it was a use of hyperbole, I would think. I would say that it's important that our students be taught the facts. I think it's dangerous if you try to take something that is highly interpretive, like Howard Zinn's work, or like the 1619 Project, or what's recommended in the Black Lives Matter curriculum. It's highly interpretive material. It is not factual history material. And if you present that to students without a solid grounding in what the truth is, then it's going to make it difficult for students themselves to evaluate what actually should constitute history. So a quick example, the 1619 Project has been criticized for saying that colonists fought the American Revolution to defend slavery. Well, there's not evidence for that. In fact, the evidence points in a different direction, that was not a primary motivation for the colonists. And that's been raised by historians and professors on this subject. So when that becomes a part of something that students are asked to evaluate in the classroom, if they don't have the facts about what happened in history and why the revolution was fought, it's going to make it very hard for them to be successful later as they try to evaluate more complex material.
Overall, though, the president has been criticized from those on the left, saying that this idea of this commission is political posturing. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's easy for political opponents to assume intent. I mean, I think I would say for the president to use the opportunity to talk about the importance of facts, to talk about the importance of history, and to raise the idea that we don't have to let America be based on the sins of the past. We need to recognize the problems that we've had. We need to recognize what slavery did to our country, what the Jim Crow laws did to our country, and what the lasting impacts of those may be. But we can't let that be something that robs us of the chance to give opportunity to every child, no matter their zip code, no matter their income, to every family, no matter where they live, to every individual. And so if we simply look backwards and say that America must continually repent of the problems of the past and not look forward to creating opportunity and creating potential for the future, I think that will harm everyone. I think that will leave out especially those who are the most disadvantaged.
Jonathan Butcher, thank you so much for joining us here on News On. Hope to have you on back again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy your weekend. Still to come here on News On, the president says we could see a vaccine for COVID very soon. But the big question now is, would you actually take it? That's the question that we asked today on News On. We'll take a look at what some of you had to say coming up when we share your voice. Also, from wildfires raging in the west to massive flooding in the south, could relief be in sight soon? We'll get an update on your nationwide forecast from Weather Nation coming up next. You're watching News On. Welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Kahn. As we mentioned, both the president and his rival, Joe Biden, headed to Minnesota here to discuss that more and what both of these candidates need to do in the Minnesota state is Pastor Daryl Scott. He is with the Trump Advisory Board. Good to see you again, Pastor.
God bless you. Good to see you as well.
So obviously, poll after poll showing that this race is tightening between these two men, especially in some of these key battleground states, Minnesota being one of them. The president narrowly lost that state back in 2016 by 2%. What does he need to do tonight? Again, we're going to be having pre-rally coverage beginning at 6:30 Eastern time here on Real America's Voice News. But what does the president need to do in this state, especially to reach the middle-class Americans, those undecided voters?
Well, for Donald Trump, the one thing he does not need to do is try to reinvent the wheel. He's had tremendous political success for an outsider coming in 2016. He has a great track record that he can refer back to now that we have had almost 4 years of a Trump administration. So if he goes in and he's able to articulate his message, his message is geared towards the middle class, towards the man on the street, towards the common man anyway. So if he goes in and he reiterates, amen, the message that he has already been proclaiming, refer back to his accomplishments as president, look at the conditions in Minnesota and the unrest that was prevalent in this city a while back, and he can show the contrast between his policies and his precepts and his opinions and those of his opponent, Joe Biden. I think it'll be pretty effective.
The Trump administration, was announced by multiple media sources, is set to set up a large arms sale with Taiwan, obviously something that China is not happy about. Is this a good move by the Trump administration?
Yes, it's a good move. It demonstrates the fact that we stand with and by our allies. We've always been supportive of Taiwan. Taiwan needs to be able to defend itself, and so I don't see anything wrong with it. And plus, China sent us a virus, so we're sending Taiwan some arms.
And there you have it.
We're pretty worried about. We're not worried about China's opinion in this regard.
I also want to ask you COVID-19 real quickly. We only have a minute remaining left, but the president is saying that we could see a vaccine in the coming weeks. This is a question that we're going to be asking our viewers, and we're going to share some of those responses coming up. But just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Do you think we will see a vaccine in the coming weeks? And if we do, just curious, would you take it?
Well, from what I understand, the vaccine is forthcoming, and I would potentially take it. I think I would take it if it's proven effective, if it's something that hasn't been fast-tracked and its effectiveness is not demonstrated. But if it's proven effective, I would have no problem. I can remember, I'm much older than you, but I can remember when we were children and we all got vaccinated. We had to all go get our vaccinations for polio and different things like that. And we were even giving sugar cube vaccinations back when I was a child. But if the vaccine is proven effective, I would have no problem taking it, and I would encourage other Americans to take it as well, so we can put this COVID-19 issue behind us as a country and move forward.
Pastor Daryl Scott, thank you so much for the Trump Advisory Board. Appreciate your time, sir. Good to see you.
Thank you. God bless you. Bye-bye.
God bless you as well. Have a wonderful weekend. So you heard what the pastor said. He said he would take this vaccine, but the question is, would you? That is a question that we are posing here on News On. We got a lot of responses. We're going to get to what some of you had to say coming up when we air your voice. We are across all social media platforms, so you can still answer that question. Again, just a reminder, we're going to have live coverage of the president's rally taking place in Minnesota tonight. Our coverage begins at 6:30 Eastern time. The president is expected to speak at 7 o'clock Eastern time. Also still to come, a quick little weather update as parts of our country are being just ravaged by all these wildfires out in the west, and also the south. The tropical storm Sally may be gone, but the remnants are still there. A lot of residents dealing with flooding. We're going to give you a quick update when we return. You're watching News On. We'll be right back. And welcome back to News On. We now want to send it over to Weather Nation's Kara James and Rob Bradley for a look at today's nationwide forecast.
As Sally now moves offshore and away from the U.S., we have to turn our eyes to yet another tropical system. We have Tropical Depression 22 with 35-mile-an-hour winds currently expected to strengthen as it meanders around the southern Gulf of Mexico for the next couple of days. We have very warm water temperatures and weak steering currents aloft, very weak winds aloft, and that will allow for some strengthening as this hangs around in the southern Gulf through the weekend. Expecting this to at least become Tropical Storm Wilfred within the next 24 hours, but there is the potential into early next week that we could see this strengthen a little bit more, perhaps into a Category 1 hurricane. But we have higher than usual uncertainty with the intensity and the track, and this is going to be because of those weak steering currents. So we still have a lot to learn about this system and where it will be going eventually. But what we do know for sure is that we are going to be seeing it organize as it sits out there in the Gulf of Mexico. Expected to become a tropical storm, perhaps a hurricane, but more information will come with that in the coming days. The uncertainty with the track, though, means that everyone, especially from Texas all along the coast all the way to the Louisiana state line, needs to at least be aware of this system for the potential impacts. And the reason that we have a little bit of uncertainty here is because there are two high pressures, one to the east and one to the west, and those are kind of blocking low pressure systems from moving anywhere, including tropical systems. So it will just be kind of hanging around until these high pressures move away enough that we'll be able to see some movement of this system. And it looks like a lot of that heaviest rain will remain well offshore into the weekend, but there could be still some moisture making its way onshore into southern Texas, where some spots could get as much as 2 to 3 inches of rain. And this could lead to some isolated flooding potential as we go into Sunday, right along the coast, anywhere from Houston to Corpus Christi down towards Brownsville. But it's into early next week that we will be keeping a very close eye on any other potential U.S. impacts. We may also see for the Texas coast this weekend some higher surf possible. This is just one of your national weather headlines, though. We want to take you out to the west, where we continue to see a big pattern change happening.
That's right. We're seeing that very heavy smoke still poured out across a large portion of the country. But a trough of low pressure moving onshore today is going to help to bring in some showers to areas across Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and eventually spreading out across the interior west. Unfortunately, it's also bringing in stronger wind gusts, and that's going to create higher wildfire danger today for those areas highlighted in those pink colors, the red flag warnings as they're known, indicating we're expecting low relative humidity and strong winds for several hours this afternoon. Here's that strong trough of low pressure. It's going to bring some showers inland across the west. It's unfortunately also going to be picking up those wind speeds, so increasing the wildfire danger in some areas, but it's also going to be clearing out the smoke for some folks on the west coast. Portland, Seattle, down to Medford. If you're along and west of the Cascades, you're likely going to get some clear skies in the days ahead, so some good news there. The bad news is still across around the Bay Area, across portions of California, Nevada, especially into Utah and Wyoming. We're still going to see thick smoke spread out across the region from those stronger winds. Unfortunately, a chance for thunderstorms accompanies that rain that moves onshore today, so lightning-sparked wildfires could be an issue in the days ahead as well if we do see dry thunderstorms, which can happen in the northwest. Also a chance for flash flooding up and down the Cascades of Oregon today into southern Oregon out towards the coast near Medford and Roseburg, and that's where we have this flash flood watch for the potential for debris flows. Flash flooding becomes much more likely over burn scar areas where the bigger wildfire.
And hopefully they get some relief soon. Coming up, we asked you whether or not you would take a vaccine to combat COVID-19. We'll have a look at what some of you had to say when we share your voice. You're watching News On. We'll be right back. And welcome back to News On. We here at Real America's Voice News, our goal is, of course, to give you a voice. As I've said it before, and I'll say it again, we work for you after all. So how do you do that? Well, you can join our community platform, which you can find on our website at americasvoice.news, or you could reach out to us on social media, submit your comment or question, and guess what? We may air it on this very program. So last night we asked you this question: when a COVID vaccine comes out, will you take it, and why? Dave Thomas on Twitter responded saying any COVID-19 vaccine should be absolutely voluntary. He continues to say for those wanting it, they should by all means have access to take it. For those choosing not to, their wishes, he said, should be respected. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. And our next response comes from ex-lib Paula via Twitter saying this: no, every time I've taken a flu shot in the fall, I've had a terrible winter. I became much more sick than when I never took a flu shot. Once I had pneumonia for 6 weeks. Oh, that sounds horrible. After a flu shot. Never again. Sorry to hear that. Ouch. Okay, Tyler Hollis wanted to chime in. She joins us from Facebook saying, I like this. Not until Trump and Congress do. Thank you so much, Tyler, for your response. We'll have to see what happens. And last but not least, John Place from Facebook says no. He says it's just too soon for me. Not enough testing and research yet, he says. And that will, we appreciate your comments there. Again, we are all over social media. We also like to hear from you, giving us a video. So you can submit that as well. You can just private message us or post it right there on our timeline. We are on Facebook, as you saw, Twitter. We're also on Instagram. We're on Parlay. We're on CloudHub, LinkedIn. And of course, we have something very special at Real America's Voice, and that is we have an online community. So what is that? Well, you can join it. It's our own social media platform. You can find that at americasvoice.news. So here's an interesting story. This is just way too cool. So there was an auction, historical items from President Abraham Lincoln, just so cool. But it's sold at auction. Would you pay this much? $81,000. Yeah, so it includes a 2-inch lock of the president's hair and a telegram that was smeared with his blood. Yeah, Boston-based RR Auction says the items were sold to an anonymous buyer. They verified their authenticity and found that Lincoln's hair was clipped during a post-mortem exam the day after he was assassinated on April 14th, 1865. Dr. Lyman Beecher Todd, a cousin of First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln, had apparently wrapped it in a War Department telegram from the night that he was shot. Now, the items had remained with the Todd family until they were sold at auction. More Lincoln memorabilia is up for auction, believe it or not, through October 7th, including 2 documents signed by the late president. I think I'd rather have that. I don't know. Seems a little creepy to have hair or blood smeared telegram. I don't know. You can share us your thoughts on that. Would you spend that much money, and would you want to have that? Curious. That will do it for this edition of News On. As always, you can follow us on social media, and as I mentioned, joined our community page. Hey, and don't forget to download our app as well. And again, a reminder, the president and his rival Joe Biden, again, on the campaign trail. They're both going to be in Minnesota tonight. We're going to have a live coverage beginning at 6:30 Eastern Time right here on Real America's Voice. You'll want to stay tuned for that. This is a key battleground state for the president. Again, he narrowly lost his state by just 2 percentage points roundabout back in 2016. Find out what he has to say and whether or not it will resonate, again, with those middle-class Americans and those undecided voters. Stay tuned for our coverage. Again, that begins at 6:30 Eastern Time. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday.